Hi, welcome back to my YouTube channel. By now you all know me, but if not, my name is Mario. I put out videos primarily on clinical research. On occasion I talk about personal finance, and one day I hope to put out some travel videos. Today's video is going to be a clinical research video, and it's going to be on one of the most commonly asked questions I get, and that is, how do I become a clinical research associate? This video, of course, is targeted to new CRAs, people looking to get into that clinical research associate role. How do you get that first position? Now, I will dig into that and talk about how you should go about it. But before I do that, I, of course, have to remind you to please smash that like button and also subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already. Thank you all for your support. I do want to mention that a lot of my topics come from the comment section. That is where this topic comes from. I do get asked how to become a clinical research associate a lot. But someone took the time to write a comment, and I do appreciate this person. They said, are there still entry-level CRA jobs? Applied to almost 100 with no success. So are there still entry-level CRA jobs in 2022? Let's talk about it. So the answer unequivocally in 2022 is yes, absolutely. Every major CRO is hiring. A lot of the mid to small CROs are hiring. A lot of the small biotech companies are hiring. A lot of the large pharma companies are hiring. Many of them are open to entry-level candidates, but I will talk about the definition of entry-level CRA in a moment. So if you are really qualified and looking for that entry-level CRA position, you should be able to find it. There's a problem with how you're going about with your applications if you're applying to 100 and getting no response. So when I say, are you qualified to be an entry-level CRA? What I'm alluding to is something that's actually in ICH, in the International Conference of Harmonization Rules. If you turn to ICH section 5.18.2, it includes the selection criteria for monitors that sponsors and CROs need to abide by. And many people that are interested in the clinical research associate role treat it like an entry-level position. They have no research experience. And that's one of the things I wish this person who wrote this comment elaborated on what their background is, because that would give them a more tailored answer. I'd be able to tell them, hey, this is why you're not being called for interviews or getting positions. But I'm going to start with the first probable cause. And the probable cause is you don't have study coordinator or clinical trial associate experience or in-house CRA experience. So if you don't have any of those roles in your past and on your resume, you are not going to be hired as an entry-level clinical research associate. I say this time and again, despite the fact that it's an entry-level CRA role, you need clinical research experience. So much so, it's literally written into the regulations, section 5.18.2. For those of you that aren't familiar with how to look up regulations, you can just straight out into Google type in section 5.18.2 of ICH, and you will come up with the selection criteria that CROs and sponsors have to follow. And it is straight in the regulations. It says that they need to be experienced in clinical research. How are you going to prove experience when you hire a clinical research associate? You're going to say, hey, they're a study coordinator, or they were clinical trials associate, or potentially an in-house CRA. I differentiate between those two roles. I realize I'm saying how to get an entry-level CRA position, but I'm really talking about a field monitor at a CRO or a sponsor as opposed to an in-house CRA. There is some potential you could be hired as an in-house CRA without clinical research experience. That said, of those three paths, I came through the study coordinator path, and I am a big advocate for study coordinator if you can go to a hospital and get hands-on experience. There are two real types of study coordinators, ones that works in big academic centers and ones that work in clinics. Sometimes there are pros and cons to either approach, but they both work. One of the potential benefits of going to a smaller clinic is you might be involved in a lot more. For example, if you go to a big academic center, you won't get contracts and budgets experience. A big study center will have a whole department that does contracts and budgets. You may also not get experience in certain parts. So I was lucky in the first position I took, even though I was at a big academic center, we rotated what we did. So at times I'd do regulatory, at times I'd do um, data entry, and I took all the different aspects and learned them. So I never was involved in contracts and budgets because big academic centers won't involve a coordinator in that. But if you're a small clinic, there's some benefits of that. The flip side is because I was at a big academic center that did oncology, I feel my oncology experience, which is vast at this point, having been a coordinator in oncology and having monitored oncology trials for going on 13 years, the reason that I can do oncology studies really easily is because of that foundation set at an academic center. I was fortunate. I worked directly with a pediatric oncologist. I sat with him, talked through different parts of pediatric oncology, learned about all the aspects. He was an expert in sarcomas, so I learned about osteosarcoma, rhabdomyosarcoma, and sarcomas. I then sat with someone that was an expert in Hodgkin's and Hodgkin's lymphoma, and then leukemias as well. So I got to sit down with experts in different areas, and the same thing happened for prostate cancer, lung cancer. So I've come up with a wealth of oncology experience. So you can go either way. You definitely need that study coordinator experience, CTA experience. If you're going to go with the study coordinator experience, think about what you want to do long term. If you really want to stick with monitoring and be a highly efficient, effective monitor in one therapeutic area, getting study coordinator experience at a large academic center may be the way to go. If you want to be a generalist and you want to do many, many different things, you want to be involved in contracts, budgets, you want to go on to project management, maybe going to a small center where you've done it all is helpful. I think either is perfectly acceptable, and you can uh, uh, basically carve out your career as you see fit as you become more and more experienced. Many doors will open. Some will be things you're interested in. Some will be things you're less interested in. For example, I love managing people, and I am highly interested in line management. I don't necessarily love every aspect of running a study. I can take a CTM role, and they've been offered to me several times. I'm just not sure how much I would enjoy them. That said, I would consider them. I have nothing against them. It's just if I were to be given path A or path B, I enjoy more of the mentoring younger CRAs, overseeing them, talking through clinical research, more so than just putting out a Gantt chart and following each timeline and making sure each metric has been met. So that's just either or, but that's besides the point here. This is the long spiel of me really reiterating what is your clinical research background. Now, I think I've said enough about that. Now, the second part is I've applied to 100 positions. I want to address this because I think this is a terrible, terrible way to go about applying for jobs. The only way I can see that this person applied to 100 plus positions is they created a resume, they uploaded it to LinkedIn or a job site, and then anything that they thought that they were qualified for, they hit the apply button. And I don't think this is a super effective way to go unless your resume would stand out by itself. Now, I can tell you off the bat, with no experience, your resume won't stand out. I happen to think for a senior CRA or somebody looking for those kind of positions, this might be a highly effective strategy. Oftentimes, I'm the only candidate with 13 years of CRA experience, 3 years of coordinating experience. There aren't that many people that are applying with a resume that says, hey, I have 13 years of CRA experience and I have 13 years of CRA experience almost exclusively in oncology. So all the big oncology companies, if I submit a resume this way, generally call me back. They at least pick up that phone and say, hey, we acknowledge you, we got your resume. So the Pfizers of the world, Novartis, GSKs, those sort of companies actually do look at my resume if it's submitted this way. But at the entry level, there's no way you're going to have success with this approach. Yeah, there's nothing that's going to make your resume stand out. The way to go about getting that entry level position is to really use LinkedIn effectively. Now, how do you use LinkedIn effectively? Well, to use LinkedIn effectively, I think you should target the organizations you're interested in, find people in the role in the organizations you're interested in, and then shoot them a message and say, hey, I'm interested in your company. I'd like to hear the pros and cons of working at the company and in your role. Now, whatever you do, do not tell them, hey, I'm a job seeker, I'm looking for a job, or are positions open in your company. The emails I won't respond to are emails of, or messages rather, of that nature. If I get a LinkedIn message that says, hey, is your company hiring? I'm like, well, contact a recruiter. I'm not a recruiter. I have no idea. But what you really want to get out of this person is, what's it like to work at the company? Is this the company I even want to work for? Do they have an established training program? Is there a bridge program? What are the opportunities? How fast do people get promoted? Think about all of these things. I know for your first position, you're just desperate to get the position, and then you say you'll figure things out from there. But take some time and think, is this a company I even want to work for? Now, you've reached out to people, 1 out of 10 has responded. You can set up some times, talk to them, understand what they do. What you should do from there is then reach out to a recruiter at that company. Look for recruiters on LinkedIn, not necessarily people in the role you're interested in, but people that are recruiters, and shoot a message to them and say, hey, I talked to this person about the clinical research associate role. I think I'd be a good fit. This is why I'd be a good fit. My background was as a study coordinator here, and I have therapeutic experience in this, and I think I'd be a great fit for your company. Would you be willing to speak with me about potential roles? And then you can reach out to that recruiter and say, talk to them and say, hey, I'm looking for entry level CRA roles. This is the background I come with, and see if you can go from there. So create the list, contact people in the role in the company you're interested in, and then reach out to recruiters. Now, I'm just going to leave you with some of my past experience, and hopefully this will give you some insight on why I suggest this approach. So I looked for my first CRA role in 2008, which was a terrible time to look for CRA roles, because at the time, if you typed in clinical research associate jobs into Google, all you'd get was articles about how clinical research associates were being laid off. This was obviously part of the start of the financial crisis. Everybody was being laid off, but clinical research associates were also being laid off. Um, the CRA role is not immune to layoffs. I know sometimes people say healthcare roles are generally exempt from layoffs. As a clinical research associate, when things go bad, you are probably going to lose your job. You don't have that same level of immunity that you had if you were, say, a frontline healthcare worker, like an ICU nurse during a pandemic. So as an ICU nurse during a pandemic, you have pretty good job security. Granted, you may be burned out and not want to continue that role, but as far as being fired, it's unlikely. But as a clinical research associate during a pandemic, I was laid off. So that happens. Just be aware of that. That was the side to say that it's not completely immune, but a big but is finding clinical research associate jobs once you have experience isn't that hard. And it's just a very methodical thing where you can just use LinkedIn to your benefit. And that's pretty much where I would focus your efforts in today's world. And then you can also use Indeed and some of the other job sites to see if they are helpful. My first position came off Craigslist, of all places. I believe I was looking for an apartment and noticed the job section and thought, hey, I can't find clinical research associate jobs anywhere to apply to, so why not try Craigslist? I found two. Ironically, it turned out that both positions were for biotech startup funded by the same venture capital firm. So even though the offer that I got was a very specific number, it was the exact same for both. So I chose one over the other, ironically, because I felt that one was more of a tougher environment to work and I would do well in a harder environment, and they seemed more stressed and things that, thinking back, I was like, maybe the other place that was laid back, that had like beer Fridays and a slightly different culture, may have worked out better. I don't know. I came from an East Coast mentality and an East Coast type of company to the West Coast. So I had that, hey, I want to see people stressed at work and I want to see people working like to the bone, and I don't. What are you doing to having a beer on 3 o'clock on a Friday? Why aren't you working? Um, so that's just my background and the way I prefer to do things. This has served me well, but it also makes overseeing other CRAs very difficult. Most CRAs are somewhat laid back, disorganized, and you'll see things that just scare me personally because my closet's behind me. If you open my closet, everything's folded. My clothes are color coordinated. So dark shirts on one side, light shirts on the other. And that's how I approach the CRA role. Everything is clearly outlined. So I sent an SIV notice to a site and I said, I will spend the first hour doing this, the next 30 minutes doing this, the next 15 minutes doing this. So I want the PI there for an hour. I'll talk to the study. I'll talk to all the training. The next 30 minutes, I'll look through your reg binder. Then I'll look through the IP. Then I'll talk about the vendors. And it was very specifically outlined. And that's the way I do everything. So I sometimes just see CRAs come to the site and wing it. And do not do that. Just don't be one of those CRAs. Unfortunately, I see tons of them. And I always think, you didn't read the prior monitoring visit report. You don't even have a plan of action for this visit. You're just showing up and winging it. And just please don't be one of those CRAs if you get into the clinical research associate job. It makes my job harder and everyone's job harder because then you come back behind these CRAs and wonder what was being done. All right, I rant aside. I think you get my point. Be very organized. Be extremely deliberate in what you're doing. Plan out your visits. Plan out everything. And you'll be successful. And I think one of my future videos will be on the different things you need to cultivate to be successful in this role. So I think I've gone on long enough. I've talked about how you can definitely not get a clinical research associate role. That's without clinical research experience, not having coordinator experience, not having CTA experience, not having in-house CRA experience. I've talked about not taking the Hail Mary approach of just applying to 100 different companies because it's easy. I talked about how to use LinkedIn effectively, how to reach out to specific CRAs at specific companies and just tell them you're interested to learn about the pros and cons of their company, their role, then follow up by reaching out to recruiters. And after all of that, if you are starting to get interviews and noticing that your interview skills are lacking, you can reach out to me directly, look up my CRA interview videos, and then just email me and say, hey, I need some coaching for that interview. So that is how I would go about getting positions in 2022. They are abundant, they're plentiful, they're everywhere. Everyone is hiring entry-level CRAs with the appropriate experience, with that background in research. And again, I will mention this, section 5.18.2 is very explicit about the qualifications for clinical research associates. And then if you go a little bit down in the regulations, I believe it's section 5.18.4, it'll talk about the responsibilities of clinical research associates. I think the regulations might refer to it as monitors or CRAs, but interchangeable. And that section says all the things that you need to know how to carry out. So if you haven't looked at section 5.18 of the regulations, it's a fun read. Now, I enjoy reading regulations, so this is why I know what sections off the top of my head. And I read that. I know the next section after monitoring, section 5.19 is auditing, etc. Many people just can't quote the regulations. I might be an anomaly here. But fun read, worth your while. And again, if you've made it this far, please smash that like button. Please subscribe to my channel. And I appreciate all your support. I, of course, as always, I'm taking suggestions for future topics. So some of the things that are potentially in the works are how to cultivate good habits to be successful as a monitor, and also basics on monitoring, things like how to do SDV, how to do query writing, how to look through an investigator site file or ISF, how to use different EDC, electronic data capture, or TMF systems. I'm open to making videos on whatever you find helpful. The only thing that I probably don't know a ton about is contracts and budgets. So outside of that, pretty much every other major topic in clinical research, I am pretty comfortable putting out videos on. So just request them. And until next time, I really appreciate you watching this far and have a great day. Thank you.